Hola muchachos, ¿qué tal? Buenos días. Aquí tienen el horario para hoy, jueves el 24 de octubre. Your warm-up for today is the reading on page 28, Jóvenes por el Medio Ambiente, Young People for the Environment. Your warm-up is to read the reading, and then you have a little bit of a glossary here at the very bottom for new vocabulary that you may potentially come across, in addition to the vocabulary that we looked at the end of last week, the handout that I gave you, the glossary. Refer to that as well. Your warm-up questions are activities 1 and 2. Indica si lo que dicen las oraciones es cierto o falso, and if the statements are false, correct them. And this is according to the reading. Hay una continua reducción de lagos en Puerto Rico. There's a continuous reduction in the lakes in Puerto Rico, according to the reading. Cierto o falso? And again, if it's false, change it so that it reads true. San Pedro Tutlepec sufrió sequías e inundaciones. This community of San Pedro suffered droughts, sequías, and floodings. Is that true or false? Exige Bastida es conocida como la Greta Thunberg de América. Is this young lady known as Greta Thunberg, the young lady from Sweden, if I remember correctly, during the pandemic, who was an advocate for the environment? True or false? Exige Bastida es una de las líderes del movimiento Fridays for Future. Bruno Rodriguez lidera la organización Jóvenes Verdes. Is Bruno Rodriguez the leader of Green Thursdays? Green Young Folks? Pacto X El Clima es una organización española. That organization is Spanish. Es una organización española. Finalmente, ejercicio 2. Responde a las preguntas con oraciones completas. Respond to the questions with complete sentences. Number 1. ¿Qué ocurrió en Puerto Rico en 2017? What happened? What occurred in Puerto Rico in 2017? Number 2. ¿De dónde es Exige Bastida? Where is Exige Bastida from? Number 3. ¿En dónde vive Exige Bastida actualmente? Where, nowadays, actualmente, nowadays, does Exige Bastida live? ¿Quién lidera la Asociación Jóvenes por el Clima? Who leads or who heads the organization Young People for the Climate? ¿Cómo se llama la organización guatemalteca? What is the name of the Guatemalan organization? And then finally, number 6, ¿de qué país es la organización Jóvenes Verdes? What country is Green Young People or Green Kids? I don't know if I would say kids. Jóvenes are young teenagers, I guess you would say. What country is this organization from? Just take a look at the reading. No hay ninguna duda que la crisis climática afecta a todo el mundo por igual. There's no doubt that the climate crisis affects everyone equally. Pero América Latina y el Caribe en particular han sufrido los estragos de esta crisis. La continua reducción de lagos en Bolivia, la destrucción de Puerto Rico por el huracán María en 2017 y los incendios en la Amazonia y otras regiones en varios países en 2019 y 2020 son solo algunos ejemplos de los retos que enfrentan los gobiernos y las comunidades de la región. If there are a few new vocabulary words, and I'm sure there will be, many of them can be found here at the very bottom, as indicated with the exponent mark there above the word. Ante esta situación, before this situation, los jóvenes confronted with this situation rather, los jóvenes han cumplido un rol fundamental y no están esperando a que las personas adultas y los países más ricos, usualmente los mayores causantes de esta crisis, richest countries, tend to be what? Usually those that contribute most to the problem. The richer the country, the greater the responsibility for the climate crisis, right? Propongan las soluciones. Una gran cantidad a great quantity, a great amount of young people, adolescentes y jóvenes de toda la región se están movilizando. They're mobilizing, young people are, para exigir que se lleven a cabo acciones que mitiguen los efectos de la crisis, to mitigate the effects of the crisis. And again, we're reading critically, reading actively, looking for these statements and whether they're backed up or not by the reading, and then looking to complete these answers in complete sentences. Por ejemplo, la joven exige Bastida, original de San Pedro Tutepec, Estado de México y miembro de la nación indígena Otomita Toteca, member of the indigenous nation Otomita Toteca, ha estado al frente del movimiento de la juventud para salvar el clima del planeta. Después de que su pueblo sufrió sequías y inundaciones, y tras presenciar los daños del huracán Sandy and witnessing the damage of Hurricane Sandy in Long Island, la joven, quien ahora vive en la ciudad de Nueva York, se convirtió en líder, became the leader of the protests and the movement Fridays for Future, que pide a los gobiernos tomar acciones frente al cambio climático, asks or demands that governments take actions to combat or to confront climate change. Su activismo es tan intenso que ahora es conocida como la Greta Thunberg de América. Como exige, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly because she is of an indigenous community, so my apologies, not familiar with the correct pronunciation there. I want to say exige. Son muchos los jóvenes de Latinoamérica y España que están levantando su voz. They are raising their voice por la defensa de un ambiente saludable, in defense of a healthy, saludable, a healthy environment, a healthy and sustainable environment. El argentino Bruno Rodríguez, por ejemplo, en el otro extremo del continente, lidera la Asociación Jóvenes por el Clima, que lucha por la justicia climática, fights for climate justice, los derechos humanos, human rights, y la justicia social, and social justice. Exige y Bruno los acompañan miles de jóvenes de España y Latinoamérica agrupados en organizaciones como Jóvenes Verdes España, Guate Ambiente Guatemala o Pacto X El Clima Colombia, todas ellas conformadas por jóvenes entre 14 y 30 años. Here you have some other expressions of the environment, the comprehension questions, all of which can be found in the actual text. Next, some brief notes on the subjunctive, and then the remainder of class to work on your projects, which we'll talk about here at the very end, and again are due on the 30th for A days and the 31st for B days. The subjunctive with verbs of emotion. We talked about the uses of the subjunctive in the acronym WEIRD, and in that acronym, the E stands for emotion. We use the subjunctive mood with expressions of will, influence, doubt, hope, but we also use it with expressions of emotion. Fundamentally, if you recall, the subjunctive requires two different subjects. A subject that is in the main clause and the verb that's conjugated in the main clause is in the present tense, present indicative. Present tense you guys learned in Spanish 1, perfected in Spanish 2. And then the verb in the second clause, which we would call the subordinate clause, is the verb that is conjugated in the subjunctive. And remember how to form the subjunctive. Subjunctive is formed, as you can see back on page 14, by essentially flip-flopping what are traditionally AR endings become ER and IR endings in the subjunctive, and then the opposite. What are traditionally ER endings become AR endings in the present subjunctive. And you can see some examples there, and you have notes on this from about 3-4 weeks ago. And again, that's on page 14 in the textbook. So if we go back to page, perdón, página 30, ¿verdad? 30. We can see how the subjunctive is formulated here. Marta espera, Marta hopes que yo vaya al lago este fin de semana, that I go to the lake this weekend. So two different subjects, Marta, different subjects, and therefore the second verb is conjugated in the subjunctive. Marta hopes that I would go to the lake this weekend. When the verb in the main clause expresses emotion or feeling, when the verb in the first clause expresses emotion or feeling, and the subject is different in the second clause, the subjunctive is required. You can see these other examples here. Nosotros form, to form, yo form, to form, yo form, ella form, ella form, ella form. But different people in this one. This one would be it, an inanimate object, and this would be an actual person. Even though these are both ella, they're referring to different subjects. So look at those expressions that are commonly used in the subjunctive that express emotion. And a lot of these we looked at earlier in the year when we introduced the subjunctive initially. Alegrarse, which is reflexive. Me alegro, te alegras, nos alegramos. It's a reflexive verb, so it needs a reflexive pronoun at the beginning of the conjugation. Esperar is to hope or to wish, like how we saw in this initial example. Marta wishes or Marta hopes. Gustar, you guys know the verb gustar, to like. Molestar, to bother. Sentir, to be sorry, also means to feel, to regret. Sorprender, to be surprising, or to surprise, conjugated like gustar with an indirect object pronoun. So, me sorprende, te sorprende, le sorprende, nos sorprende. Temer is to be afraid or to fear. A synonymous expression would be tener miedo, to be afraid of. And then these impersonal constructions, right? Es extraño, es una lástima, es ridículo, es terrible, es triste. And then a very commonly used expression for emotion or hope would be ojalá. And even though there's no subject there, it's kind of understood it's in the O form. So, using these expressions at the very beginning, they're conjugated in the regular present indicative, o, as, a, amos, an. And then the verb, whatever the verb is in the second clause, is what's going to be in the subjunctive. All right, so if we take a look at this practice activity here, and I think for the sake of time, we are only going to do the inténtalo, because I do want to give you guys time to work on your Dia de Muertos projects, which are due next week. Let's go through this nice and easy, completing the sentences with the correct form of the verb provided in parentheses in the subjunctive. You can see all the expressions at the very beginning you'll recognize from your notes. These are all expressions that require, expressions of emotions that require the subjunctive. Those are already conjugated for you, so all you need to do is provide the subjunctive mood of these verbs. So I'll pause here in the video. If you want to go ahead and knock this out, maybe I'll do the first 3 with you, pause, and then you guys can go ahead and do the rest. Number 1, ojalá, I hope or I wish, que ellos descubran nuevas formas de energía. I hope that they, whoever they are, scientists or whatnot, I hope that they discover, and it's that hope or that emotion that requires that we use the subjunctive here of this verb. Moreover, it's not something that's certain in the future, and also demands that we use the subjunctive. So, ojalá que ellos descubran. And remember, page 14 rather gives you how verbs in the subjunctive are conjugated based on whether they're AR, ER, or IR verbs. Also, the irregularities that we were looking at for car, guards, are verbs, and these high frequency verbs here at the very bottom of page 14 as they are irregular in the subjunctive. All right, back to activity. The inténtalo activity on page 31. Let's take a look at the next two. Espero que Ana nos ayude a recoger la basura en la carretera. I hope that Ana is our subject. It's how we'll conjugate ayudar in the subjunctive. And that would be ayude. Nos is not your subject. Nos is what we call an indirect object pronoun. That is whom is being helped. So that has nothing to do with your conjugation. Your subject would be Ana ayude. Es una lástima que la gente no recicle más. It is indeed. Only 9% of Americans say that they recycle. And it is indeed a pity, una lástima, that people, la gente, no recicle. For my folks that are hell locked in, you're like, well, hold up, people, isn't that a plural subject? Well, grammatically speaking, it's not. How do we know it's not a plural subject? Well, quite simply, it does not end in S. La gente is a singular subject because it doesn't end in S. Therefore, your conjugation would be singular. I'm going to pause for a moment, give you an opportunity to do 4 through 10, and then we'll go over the correct answers. And let's go ahead and take a look at number 4. Esperamos. No need for the subjunctive here. Why is that? Because we have only one subject present, and that is in the nosotros form. So proteger would actually be conjugated in the infinitive. Left in the infinitive, proteger. Esperamos proteger. Two verbs together. First one is conjugated. Second one is left in the infinitive. Number 5. Me alegro que mis amigos. I'm happy that my friends. Two different subjects. Que is our indicator of the subjunctive as well. So this verb would be quieran. Mis amigos quieran. Q-U-E-R-A-N. Excuse me. Q-U-I-E-R-A-N. I'm glad that my friends want to conserve nature. Espero que tú vengas. I hope that you come. Remember, venir is irregular in the subjunctive. And remember the trick. How we figure out how to form the subjunctive. We always start with the yo form of the verb in the present indicative. Remove the o. And then add your subjunctive endings. Remember that trick of how to do that. So vengas for number 6. 7. Es malo contaminar. It is bad to pollute the environment. Duh. Impersonal construction, only one subject. So therefore, we don't need to conjugate. We don't need to use the subjunctive. It's very similar to number 4. All right, last few here. Number 8. A mis padres les gusta que nosotros, my parents like that we participemos en la reunión. My parents are happy that we are participating in the meeting. Number 9. Es terrible que nuestras ciudades estén afectadas por la contaminación. It's horrible or terrible that our cities are affected by pollution. Estén. E-S-T-E-N. And then finally, number 10, ojalá que yo pueda. I hope that I can, pueda, hacer algo para reducir el calentamiento global. I hope I can do something to reduce the environment. Your homework, you have none for the weekend, Yay! No homework for the weekend. All you have to do is work on your guys' Dia de los Muertos project. Again, that for you guys is due October 30th or October 31st. And your rubric is here, walking you through it. Remember, you guys are coming up with 5 paragraphs. 2 paragraphs are written in the preterite to describe a specific moment shared with that person that you've chosen. If you want to run back preterite conjugations, you can go to page 4, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, page 4 in the textbook gives you regular and irregular verbs in the preterite, 2 descriptions in the in the imperfect to describe a regular habit, maybe a tradition, something that you used to do with that person, or describing how that person used to be. And if you go to page 12 in the textbook, you have those regular, and then only 3 irregular verbs in the imperfect. So 4 of the 5 paragraphs should feel really familiar to you. The new one, though, and we'll spend more time on this next week. I'll spend about half the class with you guys working on the subjunctive, and I would encourage you to utilize your notes for today. Come up with a rough draft of those sentences in the subjunctive. To describe, let's see, your hopes of living out the memory of that person. So how would that person hope you would be now and into the future? What hopes or aspirations would that person have of you, or vice versa? What aspirations would you have of that person, for example, in the afterlife, or wherever you believe they currently are in spirit? And they may very well be with you, if that's your belief system. So this is a little bit more tricky. There's obviously some emotion that's embedded in it, and that's the whole point, y'all, of using the subjunctive. So I would encourage you guys, come up with a rough draft. Use some of these verbs, right, for your main clause, and then whatever verb you come up with for the subordinate clause, that's the verb that's going to be the subjunctive. You can be the subject of the main clause, and then the person you've chosen, the subject in the subordinate clause, or again, vice versa. Your chosen person, the subject of the main clause, and then you, or maybe you and your family, or you and your siblings, being the subject in the subordinate clause, and that would be the verb required in the subjunctive. Thank you so much for your patience with this video. I hope you find it helpful. Like and subscribe if you do. Only homework for the weekend is to work on your project.